bikers saved a waitress working 2 jobs. When they learned why, the whole town stopped in shock. Short recap of episode 1. In the last episode, we met Samantha Hayes, a tired waitress working 2 jobs just to pay for her father's critical surgery. Nobody noticed the quiet determination behind her tired smile. Her exhaustion, her late-night grocery runs, her skipped meals, most of the town didn't see. One evening, biker Marcus, Reaper, Dalton overheard Samantha quietly explaining her struggles to a coworker. Moved by her story, Marcus returned the next morning, and soon dozens of bikers were lining the diner's sidewalk, forming a silent wall of protection. The rude customers stopped harassing her. Regulars and locals took notice. Even drivers slowed down near the diner. For the first time, Samantha felt noticed, safe, and supported. But while the bikers were protecting her at work, Marcus knew the story didn't end there. Because Samantha's family needed more than just protection, they needed help. By the end of the first week, Samantha Hayes' life had already begun to change. The diner where she had worked tirelessly for years now looked different. The buzz of motorcycles outside every night and morning wasn't intimidating. It was comforting. No longer did she have to face rude customers, gossiping coworkers, or the quiet judgment of people who assumed she didn't have struggles. The bikers didn't just stand there. They watched, protected, and quietly ensured she could do her job safely. But that was only the start. Because when the Iron Brotherhood discovered the full extent of Samantha's struggles, their next actions would shock the entire town. They weren't just going to protect her at work. They were going to help save her family from financial ruin, all while showing Samantha that sometimes heroes appear in the most unexpected forms. Before we dive deeper, hit like and subscribe to Hidden Heroes. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of noticing someone's struggle can spark a chain reaction of kindness that changes lives. And Samantha's story proves that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. If you discovered someone working themselves to the bone to care for a family member, would you step in? Would you take action? Or just watch from the sidelines? Marcus and the Iron Brotherhood didn't hesitate. They decided action was the only option. It was a late Thursday evening when Marcus finally got the full picture. After closing the diner, Samantha hurried to the small apartment she shared with her father. The place was modest, cramped, and filled with the faint smell of antiseptic and medicine. George Hayes, her father, was asleep in his recliner, still wearing his hospital gown. Bills covered every surface: medical, utilities, and notices for overdue payments. Samantha had been living paycheck to paycheck, cutting corners wherever possible. Marcus watched quietly from the doorway, seeing the exhaustion in her every movement. He realized protecting her at work was only scratching the surface. The next morning, Marcus called a meeting at the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse. The bikers gathered around the long wooden table. Marcus explained Samantha's situation. Double shifts. Father's sick. Bills piling up. She's barely holding on, he said. The room fell silent. Finally, Frank Hammer Ruiz spoke up. This isn't just about showing up at the diner. We need to do something bigger. Another biker, Tyler Doc Reynolds, nodded. Food, bills, transportation. We can coordinate all of it. The bikers split into teams. Financial support team reached out to local donors, friends, and small business owners. Grocery and meal team ensured Samantha didn't have to cook every night. Medical transport team drove her father to appointments when Samantha couldn't. Within days, the plan was in motion. Word got out that the biker club was helping Samantha. At first, the community was skeptical. Bikers weren't exactly known for charity in Ridgeview. But as they saw motorcycles delivering groceries, bills being paid, and rides to the hospital, perceptions changed. Neighbors who had ignored Samantha's struggles before now offered support too. One local coffee shop began donating pastries and coffee for her long shifts. A nearby pharmacy helped coordinate medication delivery. Even school kids helped by carrying groceries from the delivery trucks to her apartment. For Samantha, this was overwhelming. Tears came quietly as she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Then came the biggest surprise. A week after the bikers started helping, Marcus invited Samantha and her father to the clubhouse. The room was filled with the Iron Brotherhood and local community members who had contributed. In the center was a large envelope. Inside were donations to cover her father's surgery, bills for the next 3 months, and extra support for groceries and utilities. Samantha was speechless. I don't know how to thank you. she whispered. Marcus shook his head. You already did. By working so hard and never giving up. George Hayes, her father, smiled weakly. Looks like we've got more than a diner protecting us now. The room erupted in applause. Back at the diner, the bikers continued their morning and evening presence. But their role evolved. They weren't just protecting Samantha from rude customers anymore. They were guardians of hope. A reminder that someone cared, that someone was willing to step in when the world turned its back. Customers began asking questions, and the story spread. Samantha's tale became local legend. The waitress who worked double shifts, the bikers who noticed, and the community that rallied to support her. Even the most skeptical townspeople had to admit it. Heroes sometimes ride motorcycles. Months later, Samantha's father had recovered from surgery. Samantha no longer had to work 2 jobs. Her nights were quiet. Her mornings were calm. But every morning, the motorcycles still lined the diner. Not for protection anymore. Not for fear of harassment. But as a symbol of hope, support, and the impact one kind action can have. Samantha often glanced at Marcus and the bikers and smiled. For her, it wasn't about the money or groceries anymore. It was about knowing that someone cared enough to show up. And in a world that sometimes feels cold and uncaring, that knowledge was worth more than anything money could buy. Sometimes, all it takes is one person noticing, and one group willing to act. The diner, the bikers, and Samantha became a story people shared for years. A story of unexpected heroes, relentless compassion, and hope restored. And as Marcus watched Samantha walk through the diner with a confident smile, he thought quietly to himself, this is why we ride.